This is Peter,
And this is Tom.
and you're listening to History Teachers Talking Podcasts. All right, this is Peter Zablocki and Thomas Reska, and welcome back to the show.
Hello.
I don't know what inspired this, actually, but
Well, I think
yeah.
it was some of what we did a couple of weeks ago, and we were looking at some of the misconceptions in history. One that was
Yes.
popping up a lot, but one that we thought we could actually do a podcast ourselves about in more detail, and that is the legend, the story, the history, the background of Pocahontas,
Yes, the real
the
Pocahontas.
real Pocahontas.
Or, technically, not even Pocahontas, because her real name was not Pocahontas. Her real name is Matoaka, or...
Or otherwise, that was her birth name, but she was
yeah,
mostly known as Amonute.
Amonte.
Yes.
And out of that, somehow they got Pocahontas.
Well, it's because Pocahontas, I guess we'll get into a little bit. Pocahontas meant like little troublemaker, things like that. Like little.
Yeah, it was a nickname, right? Yep.
It was more of a nickname for her. And I read also a lot of the her tribe. They believed that if the British knew her real name, that bad things would happen to her. So that's why they purposely didn't want them to know her real name, because if they could speak her true name, then negative things would happen to her, which kind of unfortunately happened anyway.
Yep. So Matoaka, or as her nickname, Pocahontas, which literally they say to playful one or like ill-behaved child. So Pocahontas becomes famous essentially through, there's a few characters in this story, and some of them don't pop up until the sequel in the Disney cartoon. So,
Yes.
I always tell my students, watch Pocahontas 2, and they're like, there's Pocahontas 2? And I'm like, yes, it's all wrong, but watch it anyway.
Oh, they're so historically wrong.
So historically accurate.
Which, I mean,
So,
you're also to be fair, they are Disney movies, so I'm not sure how historically accurate these
you're
movies.
right.
And we'll get into it. Well, I guess we'll do a little bit of background, talk about it. We'll get into the movies that came out, 95 and 97,
Yep.
I think, or 98. But they're also Disney movies, and they were praised at the time for some good things, but there was still a lot of negativity associated with it, a lot of criticisms because of what they did and how they changed the story, because they're so popular, because those Disney movies are still on with Disney Plus and everything. A lot of people just take those things as fact. And when you see these historical movies, even though this one's not really meant to be a historical movie, they're not fact. But I saw a lot of that. This, I guess, was made for a TV movie called Pocahontas: The Legend, which also came out in like 1995, and it basically was like a live action version of the Disney movie. And it's nothing but just like made up, just gibberish.
Yeah.
That's just like, yeah, okay. They're like,
So,
put some hours in appease people.
I was going to say, it looks good on a sticker. So, Pocahontas, story of Pocahontas really has a few characters in it. So, the main characters of this story are obviously Pocahontas, as well as Powhatan, which is her father, Chief Powhatan, and also you have John Smith and you have John Rolfe. And I think the biggest, the setting of this story is the colony of Jamestown in Virginia, one of the first, if not the first colony, well, Roanoke technically, but first, I guess, successful colony in the Americas, British colony. So with the setting being Jamestown, the story really kind of starts with John Smith, before Pocahontas comes into play. And
he's the first one writing about her.
yes. So, and of course, John Smith, as we'll talk about as well, is not necessarily the nicest guy in the world. And this is a guy that wrote about himself in third person and always was awesome during his stories. And most of what we know about Pocahontas, unfortunately, only comes from that one account written by this one person that happens to be kind of a narcissist and extremely self-centered and pretentious. So it may be a little skewed what we know due to the fact that the only record of what transpired in those early days, I guess, of when Pocahontas enters American history is, coming from a shady dude. Jamestown settlement. Let's start there, right? The voyagers set sail for Jamestown from England in 1606. During this trip, there is one particular person on this boat. His name is John Smith, and actually he is allegedly accused of mutiny and almost hanged when he's on this ship coming to America. He manages, however, to stay alive and arrives with the group at Chesapeake Bay in April of 1607. And the settlement that they start at Chesapeake Bay is named Jamestown, and essentially it would become the first permanent British North American colony, right? However, from the start, it's just epic failure. The people that came here, John Smith included, The idea was, these are colonists that are not necessarily here to work. They're here, they literally thought they were going to find gold everywhere because gold's just everywhere in Virginia, and very much these are wealthy members of the Virginia Company, and their colony is dwindling. Like they're literally starving. They don't know what
They're
to do
not ready. They're not ready.
by any means. So John Smith is kind of selected as the guy that's going to go out and try to find the locals to barter for some food. And what essentially happens is before John Smith, because John Smith eventually kind of takes over the colony and whips them into shape in not the nicest way. I mean, he kind of
He's got a lot of stuff I read about him. He was not exactly, the other colonists didn't exactly like him. So again, don't go
mhm.
with the whole
Don't go with Disney.
movie. Yeah, the
Yeah,
Disney movie with, I think Mel Gibson was the voice. He was he was a very brash individual, very strong-minded, strong-willed, and that didn't always go over. It had to be his way. If it wasn't his way, it wasn't going to be allowed. And he was looking at ways to further his own fortune, further his own lot in life. That's really why a lot of these colonists come over. They're looking for wealth, like you said, Pete. They're looking for ways to better their lives. They're not there simply to live off the land and and work hard. They're there to make life easier for themselves somehow, in some
yep,
way, shape, or form. So that's what they're looking for, and they're just not prepared for a. Remember, they're coming to a climate. They're coming to, which is similar but very different. Different plants, different animal life. They're coming to a different world when they land in Jamestown. What becomes Jamestown?
yep. And also, we should mention that they're not necessarily thinking of making a permanent settlement. This is
No,
like a get quick kind of scheme. Let's get quick and let's leave this place. Um, and obviously that doesn't really pan out. And they very quickly, once they find the local Native Americans, they quickly trade a lot of their guns and other provisions for little trinkets, and then they realize that, well, what are we going to do without food and guns to hunt any game at this point? So John Smith kind of takes over this colony and institutes almost like a punishment system where if you don't work, you get punished. Um, and he kind of whips them into shape, right? Everyone,
mm-hmm.
let's build homes. You're going to build cabins. You're going to do this, and people are like, well, I don't know how to do that. Well, I'm going to shoot you if you don't do that, and that kind of deal. And on one particular expedition, Smith, and his band get captured, and they're taken to a chief, the Chief Powhatan, who is technically overseeing like 30 different tribes. This is a very very important chief,
A lot of
and
power.
a lot of power. And while John Smith is captured by Powhatan, he is apparently brought over, and they kind of lay his head on this big stone, and they're about to bash his head in.
Yeah, well, before this, yes, that's what's going to happen. Before this, he did meet Pocahontas. That's what he talks about. And she was 10,
Okay.
he was 28. So that right there, even by standards during this time, is just a little. That's too young. And
Yep.
there was never any. It was never any hint at any romantic involvement. All that started with the Disney movie. But
Yeah. Again, let's face that she was 10,
she was 10.
literally. Yeah.
And but they did start some sort of a friendship where she was teaching him part of her native language, and he was actually writing it down or trying or anglicizing it, and he was
Hmm.
teaching her some basic English, so that they did have some sort of a friendship or relationship. That's why what happens when it happens, when they put his head, like you said, P, on a rock, they're gonna smash it or whatever, and then supposedly how Smith writes is that she throws her body over his and says,
Yep.
whatever you're going to do to him, you have to go through me first. And then the father relents. But what I saw, I don't know if you saw this, Pete, that a lot of historians argue now that what that was not, they weren't actually trying to kill John Smith. That
Nope.
what that was actually a ritual to invite him into the tribe.
Yep.
And that Smith probably misinterpreted it. And Pocahontas jumping on him is not trying to save his life, but it's actually
It was like a sign of respect because it was the daughter.
almost like a
Yeah.
sponsor. I am sponsoring this man's admittance into our tribe,
Yep.
and that's probably what really happened. But you could also understand if you want to give Smith the due that
Benefit of the doubt.
the
Yeah.
benefit of doubt that it could be misinterpreted that these guys are putting my head on a rock, another guy's coming over with a big rock, and then the girl jumps on top of me and starts saying stuff in a language I don't understand. You might think she's trying to talk them out of killing me.
Yeah.
That was probably not the case.
And when analyzed actually further, when you look at different historians, they believe that if anything, if this actually did transpire, it probably was what you're saying. It really was this ritual because normally what would happen to whites that were captured by Native Americans, even at this time, and even by tribes that were controlled by Powhatan, they would get like mutilated. I mean,
Yes, well, yeah,
getting hit with a rock over the
that's
head would have
how
been
they would
like
do
a
it.
really
Yeah,
kind way of going. So
like
they're like,
absolutely. Like I was, if you watch the Pocahontas movie, the Governor Radcliffe, I think he's in the movie. He's like the bad guy, kind of.
mhm.
In real life, he did die by the hands of
Native Americans,
the
right?
Native Americans. Yeah, him and 14 other colonists. What happened was they were invited. Then they kind of lied to him. So, oh, we're going to give you corn. They were starving. They come in and they are actually ambushed by them. Radcliffe himself was tied to a stake in front of a fire, and then the women removed all of his skin using mussel shells. Like they
Yep.
would take a shell of a mussel, scrape off his skin, toss the piece into the flame. As he watched, they skinned his face last, and then they burnt him alive at the stake. So that's what would normally happen to him: smashing
I was
with a
gonna say,
rock.
yeah. So highly
They just
likely they weren't just gonna be like, "Let me knock you with a rock over your head."
no,
Like
no.
it probably
They,
they were
they
not
had
trying to
more
kill.
inventive ways of, having someone going to death. Imagine they showed that in a Disney movie, like the
Yeah,
guy
right.
getting guy getting chopped up with mussel shells and burned
Uh,
alive. That'd make an
that's
interesting
nuts.
movie. Put a little,
That's nuts.
put some show tunes to it.
So John Smith's captured. He's in captivity. He makes friends with Pocahontas. Again, she's the daughter of the chief. She's about 10, 11 years old at this time, based on John Smith's own historical recollection. And then Um, ultimately, he is released, and this kind of sets up a kind of really friendly relations, right? I would say this sets up friendly relations
Well,
between
for a short
for a
time
short
period,
period of time.
it
Yes,
basically it's hot and cold.
yes.
From the relations between the Indians and Jamestown, on and off, really until the king dies. Once the chief dies,
Powhatan, yeah, Powhatan.
once Powhatan dies, that really marks the end of any positive relations between the two groups.
Yep,
Pocahontas is dead by that point too.
yep. It actually starts to kind of go downhill a little bit when John Smith ultimately winds up coming back to England. Right, he goes back to England. I want to say I think it's in now. I think in 1608, right? He dispatches letters to England about kind of what's happening and the friendships they made, and so on and so forth. He gets elected in September of 1608, the governor of the council itself. And there's a really bad winter that kind of starts, right? And he really, Smith really demands like crazy work ethic from the settlers to kind of increase survival and kind of utilizes really harsh measures to keep them in line, right? And while this is happening, the Native American food supplies are kind of scarce as well because the winter's so bad. So they're kind of not going, which is straining these relations between
Because the
Powhatan.
colonists want the food. They're saying if you don't give us the
Exactly.
food, we're going to burn down your village and stuff like that. And there was some trade going
And
on.
they actually start doing that, yeah.
Well, but the main thing I saw that the Palawan wanted is they wanted swords. They wanted metals, the
Yep,
shovels, the pikes, but mostly they wanted swords. And in the beginning, Smith was trading some swords with them and the other colonists. But then as time on, I'm like, we can't keep on giving them swords and weapons because that we're kind of going to get
yeah,
on more even, even sides here. So we can have given them all our advanced technology, you know?
yeah,
And when they stopped doing that, that's when also when relations started to sour. You have that, then you have the winter when it's not as much food, and they say, "Well, give us food." We're like, well, we're not just going to give it to you. We don't have it to give to you. And like, well,
yep.
we're going to take, and that's just making things worse and worse.
And then things really kind of hit the fan. In 1609, Virginia Company drafts a new charter for Jamestown, and Smith is kind of, they don't want him. He's like, you're failing at this. So he is recalled back to England, where he has to face allegations of misconduct, right? He relinquishes leadership in the settlement, and he goes back to England in 1609. And at that point, when Pocahontas actually visits, within a month or so after his departure, she is told that Smith has died,
Yeah,
right? And they technically Virginia, or rather Jamestown, doesn't see Pocahontas. They say for like 3 to 4 years afterwards. She just doesn't come and visit anymore.
and she vanished for about 3 years. And there's some talk that during that time she actually was
She got
married.
married. Yeah,
Yeah,
she got
no,
married.
Native American. Yeah, and there was some talk with that. That also that marriage was more basically political than anything else. Remember, she's still very young at this point, and
Yeah,
she basically married another tribal leader that was pro British, pro English.
Yeah.
and wanted her to help her. Basically said, you're not going to go visit your father. I'm going to ransom you to your father. Your father has to release some of these English people that he captured in, I think 1613 or right a little before
Yeah.
that. And basically, the father is like, "No, I'm not doing it." So he didn't see the father didn't see her. He only sent like
Yeah.
half the ransom, not all of it, not enough to get her released.
Yeah. So she gets captured. What is known as the First Anglo-Powhatan War, right? So this is after John Smith leaves. Jamestown settlers and Indians kind of begin their. This is after 1609, so like 1609, 1610. That's kind of where the first year of the war starts, and this war continues for a few years. And ultimately, what's happening at this time is Jamestown is literally falling apart, right?
Yeah,
Um, I mean, to the extent that after he leaves, other people are like, we're gonna leave too. Like, so they hop on their ship, and the Jamestown literally they just want to abandon this whole. They think it's a disaster. This doesn't work. But the mother country didn't approve them leaving, and actually, their ship is blocked from escaping by another ship of a new governor, Lord Delaware. That kind of blocks them in and says, "No, you guys are staying." And what starts is becomes known as this like winter of starvation. This is like 1610.
it was bad. Yeah,
um,
it's one of the
it was like to the point that over the years we finally figured this out, and archaeologists figured this out that these guys didn't just start eating their dogs and cats; they started eating one another. So you have cannibalism, and it kind of starts in one particular case that was reported on. A man killed his pregnant wife and was literally in the process of like roasting her um, while he was captured, and they killed him for it. But Jamestown was
things
the
were not
drought.
good. Things were not
No,
good.
they were literally eating one another. I mean, it was that bad. Um, and what's happening at this time while Jamestown's going through that? This is kind of an interesting tidbit, which is where our third main character comes into play. Um, John Rolfe, right? So John Smith leaves to England. Jamestown falls apart. Pocahontas not really seen yet. She's about to be captured, but she's not really seen yet. And John Rolfe sails with another group of men to Jamestown. And ironically, and perhaps it's one of those fates in history, his ship actually crashes. And what's interesting here is when his ship crashes in Bermuda, it actually saves him and his crew, because had they made it in 1609 to Jamestown, highly likely he would not have survived due to the fact of the starvation time
In the
and the
food, the
freezing
climate,
cold.
yeah, he would have
Yeah.
being in a warmer climate saved them.
Oh yeah, they hung out in Bermuda and they fished and they ate and they kind of just they're actually not want to say they had fun, but they were able to take the crashed ship, and from it they actually build two new ships, small ships, and they continued their voyage to Jamestown. And by the time they got to Jamestown, the terrible winter was over, so they kind of missed all that. So that's how John Rolfe enters the story. Because he, I guess, in the unfortunate accident of his ship crashing in Bermuda, he actually survived to make it to Jamestown. And he, plays a bigger part in Pocahontas too. It's the sequel. But so anyway, so Pocahontas, as you said, Tom, right? Pocahontas is at this point captured.
And during this time, yeah, she's under the care of a minister by the name of Alexander Whittaker, and this is when
Mhm.
she's learning about Christianity. She learns English culture. She's taught how to speak English, and she eventually actually is baptized and converts to Christianity
Mhm.
during this time, and she's no longer known as Pocahontas after that. She's given the name Rebecca, so that's
Yeah.
her Christian name, and that's what she's going to be called. She's no longer. She has some titles, but she's not referred to as Pocahontas in any of like a lot of the literature, a lot of the writings. When Rolfe meets her, she's not I said this is the girl who's Pocahontas, but she's Rebecca. That's
And
what
she's
she's
still
known.
young. I think at the time, I think she's like 16, isn't she, or
She's
something like that?
16, 17 at the oldest. Yeah,
Yeah.
she's a teenager.
Yeah. And that's where so that's when John Rolfe kind of comes into
Yeah.
play, and he meets her while she is, I guess, in the latter stages of her captivity. Like you said, she's already been baptized. She's kind of assimilated to the British because her father kind of didn't want to trade for her, um, and that's kind of where she meets John Rolfe, and they fall in love. Um, John Rolfe actually needs to get permission, from the governor to get married to her, and the governor grants him permission, and therefore the two of them do get married on April 5th, 1614. Um, and they get married at Jamestown.
Yeah.
and for 2 years they actually live at Jamestown, and they have
It brings a lot of
pursued.
positive. It brings a lot of positive relations, I believe, right? Like that
Yes,
kind
it
of.
does.
It's almost that old school medieval type of thing. Like let's have the two, the two major, the sons or the daughters of these major people come together. They get
Yep.
married, and now okay, now we have a reason to be peaceful with each other. Kind of like a medieval Europe type of sense. You still had this at this time, but they said from all accounts I saw, they the two were actually in love. They did
Yep.
love each other. It was political to a certain degree, but it was also a very loving relationship. Also,
Yep. And mind you, John Smith is nowhere in the picture. He's still in England,
well,
writing his
they
stories.
think he's dead. They think he's dead.
Yep.
It's not. She does meet him again though. We'll get to that, but I
She
think.
does. Yeah, we'll get to that. Yep. So, one thing, I don't know if you saw this, I thought this was kind of interesting. When the news of John Rolfe marrying this Pocahontas, or ex Pocahontas, now Rebecca, she's still known as a princess. I mean, she technically is a princess, right? And it actually
Yes and
becomes
no. Yes and no. Right? Like apart as
right.
far as actually being a princess,
Yeah, I guess.
she
I mean,
wasn't in
her
line
father
for
was.
anything. Her father
No,
was
she would
the
not.
chief.
No.
She
Yep.
was never in line, but she was the last of 26 kids.
Yes. And her mother, they said that her father had so many wives, and most of the time, what happened is the wives would birth him children, and he would keep the children, and the wives would be like, "All right, go away, go find another husband." And oftentimes they died, and we actually don't even know what happened
Yeah, they
to
think the mother
Pocahontas'
might
mom.
have died in childbirth, but I mean,
Yep,
which was very common back then.
yep.
But no
So
one knows for sure. Yeah.
what was interesting is that some of the British in the British court thought that this marriage between John Rolfe and Pocahontas was controversial for the fact that he was a commoner and he had the audacity to marry a princess, which I thought was kind of
Yeah,
interesting
it's
and
kind of
all
interesting
that.
because they're kind of you would think it'd be the other way around. Like, how is he marrying this foreigner, this native, this savage, right? But it's actually they're
Yep,
looking down on him. Well, she's got royal blood. And now they're looking down. So they're looking down on him because he was just a tobacco planter.
yep.
So
And
he
as you
probably
mentioned,
introduced tobacco to Jamestown. It was
he
him.
did. I was going to go there.
Yeah.
He actually
Wow.
introduced tobacco to Jamestown, and which technically became their gold. I mean, Jamestown survived as a colony and thrived, and that's kind of how England got its foothold, really, in the Americas, is because of
Yeah.
Jamestown, and that is because of John Rolfe. He was
Crazy.
definitely the cooler John from the two Johns, except he's relegated to the sequel, but um, yeah, he introduced tobacco to Jamestown and kind of made it profitable. And by the time when he came, when their two ships finally arrived, it kind of reinvigorated the colony, and then more ships started coming from England, and women started coming this time around, as opposed to just men, which was the first excursion. And things are going great for them, right? And then at that point, about 2 years in, again they have their son Thomas Rolfe, born in 1615, and the young couple decides they're going to sail for England.
They're basically trying to go there to try to get more money for the Jamestown settlement from the Virginia Company. That's their
Yep,
plan anyway. They get more
yep,
money, so they're going to go to England. And when they go there, she's actually very popular.
super popular. Yep,
Yeah, she's known as Lady Rebecca Wolfe.
hmm
She attends plays, balls, presented to royal family, and that's where she actually meets Smith again.
yeah. They kind of they're at a party, and she
Yeah,
runs into
and
Smith, and
she
they
was
said like she's like, "Oh my god, like there's John Smith."
They said she called him father or some a term very similar that loosely trends into that. But she was also angry with him also for a lot of the treatment that she heard her people suffered from him also. And the fact
Yep.
that he never came back. So there was some of that anger. Again, you watch the Disney sequel, it's a little bit different. I think
Yeah.
he saves them from he saves them from the Tower of London when he's in like a hood or something like that. So
Yeah.
it's
No. Yeah. No.
not historically accurate.
Yeah. No. Historically accurate. More so was Pocahontas runs into him at a party, when they're visiting like royalty, and she's kind of like PO'd at him. She's like, "Dude," right? So she takes him to the side, and supposedly she's not necessarily the nicest to him. You're right. She refers to him as a father, like if I view you as my father, like my father viewed. She goes into this whole thing of like respect between them. But yeah, she's not happy with him per se. And this is kind of where this gets interesting too, because John Rolfe technically wrote three accounts of what happened when he was in Jamestown and how he met Pocahontas. And all three of those accounts are slightly different. And they're all written at different times. So the first initial unofficial account after his capture, he kept a diary. And in that diary, he does not mention Pocahontas, right? Or Matoaka, at all. Nothing. Zero. And again, this is directly after he was captured. He doesn't even mention that she was there. Then, when Pocahontas and news of Pocahontas and John Rolfe that are sailing to England comes out um, in 1616 or so, the that's when he starts to write his second thing, second
Yeah, and
account.
he's adding
He's
things to it.
Yeah, and that's when
He's making her a heroine. Is basically
exactly.
what people are saying. He's making her not diminishing what she did, but he's making this account that's more fantastic. Oh, she came and saved me, this young girl. They were going to smash her
Yeah,
with
yeah,
a stone,
exactly.
and it made more interesting of a story basically.
Yep.
And then that's what happens a lot. And then this story becomes historic fact. People don't really do their research, or they like how it sounds, and it becomes like the narrative. The story becomes the fact for a long time. And you get the Disney movie, which actually which came out supposedly 400 years after Pocahontas was born on that actual date. The Disney movie, the first one in 1995.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was why they stage it. So,
I feel like she doesn't get enough play as a princess. All these other princesses get like, T-shirts, and
well, we'll
I
get
feel
to
like
that. But she actually, from what I said, she's considered the first
non-white, right?
non-white, yeah, minority Disney princess. Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, wasn't it? Well, I thought it was Aladdin.
no, but
Wasn't it Jasmine?
yeah, but I think
Maybe.
Pocahontas, I think, was before that.
Well,
But
yeah,
even
I think
that,
so.
Aladdin, she's also the main person of the story. Wherein
That is true.
Aladdin is the main person, not Jasmine.
Yeah.
Come on,
So
come on.
Aladdin was 1992,
Oh,
but
really?
you're right. Aladdin's not the main. Aladdin's the main character, not Jasmine. That makes sense, right?
Yes, that's what I
All
just
right.
said.
See, you said it right. All right, so that made sense. So anyway, so they're in England. Things are going well, and then they're preparing to return back to Virginia. Right? It's March of 1617. They hop on a boat and they're going back to Virginia, and then things kind of don't work out the way they want to.
No,
Right?
well, basically in March of 1617, they set sail for Virginia, but they didn't really make much progress because she got very sick. And
Yeah.
they actually go to a shore in Gravesend, England, and they don't really know what disease it was. Some say that it was tuberculosis, dysentery, smallpox, pneumonia. There's even a rumor that she was poisoned, but she dies. She gets really sick and she dies. And supposedly on her deathbed, she says, "Almost die, but 'tis enough that my child liveth, that my child Thomas lives on." So she passes away, and she's buried right there in March 21st, 1617, at St. George's Church in Gaveston. She's there. And Rolfe actually still goes back to Virginia. He doesn't want to. I heard conflicting reports. They kind of convinced him that no, you have to go back. You still have to go to Virginia anyway. And the son actually remains with relatives.
Yeah, he stays with his brother, and he's raised by Henry Rolfe.
Yeah, because it's years before
Well, the
um,
reason why is they said his son was also very sick at the time, and
he
there
said
is
he wouldn't survive the trip to
exactly
Virginia.
like he might not survive the trip. So you know what? It's going to stay in England, and he stays in England, and eventually, he does come back to Virginia and gets married and has kids, and the kids have kids, and the kids have kids, and there is direct descendants of Pocahontas that are alive.
Yes, we'll
Um,
get to some of those later. Yeah.
John Rolfe does actually remarry eventually. He marries one Jane Pierce. She's a daughter of an English colonist, Captain William Pierce, and they have a daughter, Elizabeth, and actually fairly quickly. I think he gets remarried like 2-3 years.
This is his
Um,
second wife to die because his first wife actually died also.
yep, yeah. So Pocahontas was actually his second wife. This guy got around, huh? Thomas Rolfe, the son, does grow up in England, but he returns to Virginia as an adult. Um, and he, like his father, is a tobacco planter.
Yeah, he basically goes back and he becomes a pretty famous, well, not famous, but he's an influential tobacco, Thomas Rolfe, tobacco farmer also. He has a lot of family land that he gets in Virginia. So
Yeah.
he's actually pretty well off. Um,
We should also
but
mention that what happens to John Rolfe. I mean, he's killed by Native Americans.
eventually, yeah.
Yeah, there's an Indian massacre of 1622, in which he dies. So it's kind of interesting. I think that's kind of an irony in all this. Did you read about the fact that they actually don't know exactly um, where
Yeah,
she's buried? Like they know where she's buried, but then the church burned down in like 1700s, and
there's a marker, but they don't. It's probably not where it actually was. anything like that, right?
Yeah, like they know it's there, probably under the new church, but like they don't know exactly because of the fact that the church burned and they rebuild it on top of it. So Pocahontas dies. John Rolfe dies from Native American attack. I would say 5 years after Pocahontas. Their son lives, comes back to Virginia, takes over the land that belonged to Powhatan at one point, and eventually is given to John Rolfe and then willed over to Thomas Rolfe, where he is a very wealthy planter in Virginia in mid to late
And
1600s.
he actually does try to connect with his Native
Native
American
American. Yep.
like relatives too. He goes back and forth basically.
And then what do we have? John Smith. I mean, I know John Smith continuously writes and rewrites. He's trying unsuccessfully to return to America, and he never really makes it. So he spends a lot of time writing. I mean, he publishes more books and just keeps on detailing his time abroad, right?
In the New World. Because remember, most people in England, they're still only hearing about the New World. They don't have any plans of going. They're not actually going to go. So
yeah. So John Smith also dies in 1631. So by 1631, all three of the characters are dead. Pocahontas in 1617.
The chief dies a year later.
Yep. So, all right. So this is the official story of Pocahontas, right? What are some of the interesting tidbits that, fun facts?
Well, yeah. Well, basically, a lot of the story doesn't is challenged whether or not a lot of this stuff even happened, whether what took place. But some of the interesting facts that I was able to find, one is just some of the people that are related to her today. Like she does
Yeah.
have a number of relatives today, but a lot of these relatives are actually have served it. Like the former First Lady of the United States, Edith Wilson, was a
Mhm.
descendant of Pocahontas.
Yep. I did
The
read that.
Senator Janine Shaheen is a descendant of Pocahontas. So you have a lot of these individuals that are actually from, I believe she's from New Hampshire. Yeah, New Hampshire. She's a United States senator from New Hampshire, and she's actually a descendant of Pocahontas. So there you go.
Yeah.
Yes, he's still around today. Even though some other senators are called Pocahontas, here's one that actually is a descendant of Pocahontas.
And then the other thing that I kind of, and we alluded to this at the beginning, is the sheer fact that this great romance never happened between her and John Smith. And like you mentioned
And that
earlier,
romance was never really taught. That romance was created in '95 by by Disney.
yeah,
And
we need to stress the fact that she was a 10-year-old girl at the events of, at the meeting of John Smith. Did you know that Pocahontas' mother's name was also allegedly Pocahontas? That was also her nickname.
well, that could explain why she had it.
Right. Right. I think
Um,
that's it.
yeah, that's pretty much like again, it's one of those stories where a lot of it comes from like narrative history. People adding stuff to it, changing it to fit their stories to maybe fit something that they want to actually move forward with. Yeah,
This was our nice little episode on Pocahontas, and I hope everyone enjoyed it. And please do not forget to subscribe wherever you listen to this podcast. So I hope everyone has an awesome week, and we will hear from you guys again next week.
sounds good.
Enjoy. Take it easy, guys. Enjoy. I hope everyone enjoyed our podcast, and if you would like to email us, you can do so at historyteacherspodcast@gmail.com.